Welcome to Activate Now. I am the founder and chief correspondent, Ed Higgins, and we have a special guest with us in the house tonight. Deedra Abboud's story is a quintessential American story. She was born and raised in Arkansas, the youngest of four girls raised by a single parent. Her mom worked 2 or 3 jobs to keep a roof over their head and food on the table. She remembers her always being tired, so tired. But even 3 jobs was not enough to afford health insurance. So her mother lived in constant fear, knowing they were 1 ER visit or a serious illness away from being homeless. Deedra is an Arizona attorney running for U.S. Senate as a Democrat. Welcome to the show, Deedra. How are you doing today?
Great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. I got to tell you, so what drew me to you and your presence and your story was the campaign tales that you tell about being out there with the folks and the conversations that you have. And they're conversations that if you've ever been canvassing or door to door or in a campaign, a political campaign, you do talk to a wide arrangement of people. What befuddles me is some of the ignorance of Americans out there and the conversations, but I like the way that you go about it. You're a lot more understanding, a lot more patient than I would be in some of those situations. Can you tell us a little bit about your campaign and how it's been going and some of the stories that you've had?
I hear it a lot that I show a lot of patience, especially in the campaign chronicles, and they're true stories. And I just, sometimes the conversations are longer, but I just take a snippet of it. But, I try to be as accurate to the conversation as possible. I record, after each event, I record immediately, my experiences, because I think that the experiences are extraordinary, and it's almost like voyeurism. People get to watch what's going on during the campaign and see, the kind of questions that I have that are presented to me and then how I respond to them. But, it's a wide range, as is people. So, people assume that all my questions are about the fact that I'm Muslim, and they're not. Very rarely are the questions that, but I do get that. But a lot of times it's just, not understanding how the system works, as in politics, not understanding policies, not understanding why problems aren't being fixed. And, I have these conversations every day, and then I try to put as many of them as I can into this shareable forum, making memes with these conversations.
And I love it. I mean, sometimes I get scared because I think that some people haven't ever left their homes. But then I realized, everybody's different. Everybody has good days, bad days. And maybe that was just something that they felt like they should bring up to you at that moment. But it's great. I love the way you handle it. You actually break it down. You explain it. You're very human about it. You do have a lot of patience.
Well, I'll tell you the secret. The secret is I don't take things personally, because I don't believe most things are meant to be personal, even though they sometimes come out mean. They come out very tone deaf. Sometimes they come out just, I don't think people listen to themselves when they're talking sometimes. So by not taking it personal and always believing, unless someone proves otherwise, that their intention is good, that they're coming from a sincere place, regardless of how it sounds, then I can respond to them on that human to human level and hopefully motivate people, inspire people, show people that we could actually do that more often and should do that more often. Instead of assuming someone means something negative or assuming what someone means, I try to just focus on exactly what they said instead of putting my interpretation on it. And sometimes I even ask, okay, so what you're saying is X, or, this could go a lot of ways. Break it down for me, so I know which direction are we going.
Right. And that is critical, especially on forums like social media, where things can be taken out of context so easily, or when you're talking to somebody in public and you have anxiety like myself, and you may say things a little different than you thought that they were supposed to come out. It is important to think that other people, that there may be just some miscommunication to bring it out. And I need to get better at that myself, I will tell you. So I look to you for guidance on that. It's pretty amazing. I love it.
And
Um,
we see it though, and this is so key. We assume that if I say, people take things personally or to add a context, we assume that we're talking about the other side, whatever the other side is. But I actually see it on the same sides. I see people, for example, two people who are supporting me get up in a fight with each other because they're not listening to each other. They're assuming that when someone makes a joke, that they're attacking me, and it's clear to me that it was a joke. But we're just so sensitive to assuming everyone's trying to attack, or the other thing is we nitpick to death. So if someone makes a statement, instead of saying, yes, that statement's true, and instead we start, this is not the whole picture. Okay, can we say yes, and let's validate what's being said. Let's agree that we do agree on that point, but we want to add something. So within our own side, we could be a lot more generous and understanding.
there is a lot of sensitivity in the world today. It's a heightened level of sensitivity too. It's like everybody's walking on pins and needles, and it's anxious. It gets anxiety. When I talk to a lot of my different colleagues and allies, and if something isn't said the exact way that they want to hear it, sometimes it's a battle. It becomes a flame war, and it's counterproductive to what we're trying to do. I mean, we're trying to grow all together. At the end of the day, we all want to eat. We all need to, feed our families and make sure we have a roof over our head. And in order to get there, we have to get rid of all the other superfluous stuff that really gets in the way. It's divisive. It doesn't help.
Right. A good example of that is, the Medicare for all, the Medicaid for all, the single payer, healthcare for all. It doesn't matter which phrase I use, someone's going to attack me for not using the right phrase. I'll say healthcare for all, and someone will say, no, we want single payer. And I'm like, okay, that's what we're talking about. Or I'll even say Medicare for all, and they'll say, no, we want single payer. And I'm like, and what's the difference?
Yeah. So in 2016, when everybody was talking, healthcare for all, nobody differentiated between what the actual wording was. Now I got taxed today. They said, well, you gotta make sure to question your people more on their terminology, what they're using, because there's some secret government plot to use the wrong words. I don't know. I don't get it. All I know is I want to make sure that everybody can walk into a hospital and get care. Right. So whatever the universal word is for that, I'd like to use it.
I want everyone to be able to invest in a system that allows them to have health care based on health instead of profit. It's real simple. I could care less what you call it. Let's get it.
Yeah. It could just be healthcare. I don't know. It's kind of weird. So is this your first campaign?
It's the first campaign as me as the candidate.
Okay. So you've been involved in other campaigns before.
Yes.
Awesome. And so how's the field out there in Arizona? I don't know if you know a little bit about my backstory, but I started off not being able to vote for my candidate on March 22nd, 2016, and it led me to a 2-year tour on the road. And I lived in Arizona for 8 years before I entered this 2-year tour. I was working for the Sanders campaign, and then I ended up on this 2-year tour, and I just got complete. I just got off the road. So I'm not fully aware of what's going on in politics in Arizona these days, but I'm hearing a lot of crazy stuff because I just had Devin Del Palacio on. I had Jose Torres. There's a lot of great people running, and there's just a lot of divisiveness at the House. There's people carrying Pepe flags, and I'm just hearing all types of crazy stories. So what's going on in the political climate there in Arizona these days?
I think that Arizona is trying to figure out what its identity is. I think traditionally everyone has constantly, including Democrats, constantly have said that Arizona is a red state. And I would have disagreed with that even before 2018, because as a civil rights and social justice advocate, I was already traveling all over the state of Arizona, and then, being an attorney, talking to people. But in 2018, what I really want people to understand is that we are a purple state and we look like a red state because normally we don't run Democrats. We don't run Democrats in areas that they don't have a really good chance of winning. And we assume that, they couldn't win there, so let's not waste our resources on a place we can't win, and instead just focus on the places that we're very likely to win, or really big offices like statewide offices. Unfortunately, what happens, and what happened in 2016, is if you don't have other candidates running in other places, then you don't have Democrats talking about democratic values in other places, so they can't support up ballot. And definitely up ballot can't support down ballot because there's nobody down there to support. And you also don't get to plant seeds for the future to have the discussions that could lead to people being interested in Democratic candidates. And that's not the case this year. We have Democrats running in almost every race in Arizona.
Wow.
We have primaries and a lot of races that we've never had this before. It's unprecedented in Arizona. So you have a lot more people out talking, and that's how it all starts. And we're supporting up ballot, we're supporting down ballot. And this is really how you make a change, but more importantly, how you give people choices so that they actually could vote more on the D side of the ballot instead of the only choice being the R side. And if there's only an R side, then they can vote for themselves and win. They don't have to convince anybody because there's nobody running against them.
Yeah, I actually sat up in the galley of the House of Representatives, and at the back was the Democrats, and it was like they were the bad kids. It was the row of Democrats, and then the rest was Republicans. And I questioned a lot of folks when I was out there because I was mad. I didn't really realize how different the political system was than what I thought it to be. And I asked a whole bunch of questions of the Democratic Party as going through the levels. Why aren't candidates run? Oh, they won't win here. They won't win there. Well, you'll never get to that level if you don't run anybody in the first place. If you don't have any marketing in certain areas, you're never going to get a client in that area. That's just business 101. And marketing. If you don't have any clients out there, you don't have any candidates out there, you're never gonna see who actually would want to vote for those candidates. So you got to start.
Right. And that's exactly what we're seeing. Number one, we're seeing Democrats come out of the woodwork. I always say 2018 is the year that Democrats need to come out loud and proud. We've been telling the LGBTQ community to do this in order for people to know they're there and start accepting that that is the reality we live in, and that we are all neighbors and part of a community. And that's what Democrats are finding. Wow, I didn't know I had any Democrats in my neighborhood, because Democrats don't go around, I guess, telling people that they're Democrats. And in some areas, they actually hide. But again, this year we had CD8. So we had a special election on the west side, and this was a Republican stronghold. This district hadn't had a Democrat since 2010 even run in that district.
Wow.
And even in 2010, it was a zero resource. It was basically someone got on the ballot and that was the end of it. So there wasn't work done. And in this special election, in 3 months, they were able to bring all the resources together. Even candidates like myself sent our volunteers over to CD8 to campaign for this Democrat candidate, Dr. Harrell. And she did lose, but she lost by less than 5% or
Wow.
points. I forget which one. And it was a 20-point or 20% lead toward Republicans when it started out. And it was a temporary special election. So that election, that seat is again open in November. We definitely believe that we can make up that 5%.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's awesome. That to me is not a loss by any means. I mean, I know technically it's a loss, but to me, it shows that you can push the needle, that you can definitely get a candidate in that area that is Democratic. And I think you'll see that around a lot of the country, where I've seen races just go unopposed because people just don't want to put in the effort.
Right.
And that's silly to me, because you'll never know what you can or cannot do in that area if you don't put in the effort. We're talking decades that nobody's ran a certain party in that area, or there isn't even a third party allowed in that state. It's counterproductive to what we call a democracy, what we're trying to say we are a democracy.
Right. And let's talk about what effort is. Traditionally, unfortunately now, effort has become, give me a lot of money so I can run a lot of ads and send a lot of materials to people's houses. That is actually not effort. Every study shows that television ads and materials sent to people's houses has zero impact on their voting decisions. Zero. Wow. But the only thing it can do is it can raise awareness, name recognition.
Right.
And the theory has always been that if people don't know, they're more likely to vote for a name that they recognize if they don't remember a negative reason why they remember the name. So if they're like, like we've had someone in here a long time ago ran, and his name was Bill Gates. By coincidence, he has a very famous name.
Right.
So a lot of people are going to vote for that name if they don't have a preference, because they're like, oh, I know that name, it must be good, unless they know something specific about this person that, they want to vote against. But that's a one-off. This year, what we're doing, what our campaign is doing, is effort is actually on the ground, talking to people, getting them excited, and having a really heavy social media game. I cannot believe that after 2016, we didn't learn the lesson that social media is a powerful force and can be used for good. And it's not just putting lame posts out every once in a while, is like reminding people you exist. I don't know. It has to be messaging. It has to be exciting people. It has to be something that makes them want to hit the share button, the like button, to interact in some way. So that's what we're doing. And that's true grassroots. Grassroots is not, I'm a Democrat and I'm, running a bunch of ads or sending a bunch of people or stuff to people's houses. The number one way to affect a vote is for people to meet the candidate. Number one. Of course, I can't meet 7 million people. That's how many we have in Arizona. I'm going to give it a good college try, but I can't meet 7 million people. But the number one way is for them to meet a candidate or see a candidate in real life or hear a candidate speak. The second way is for someone they know to recommend a candidate. Right. And the third way is some kind of a third-party contact that they trust, such as someone sharing something on social media that's a friend of theirs, or seeing a message on social media that they agree with. But it's way down the line of, I got a mailer and thought, wow, this person's super cool. Especially since most of the mailers are, hi, I'm so-and-so and I support A, B, and C. Vote for me.
Yeah, they don't work these days. And you're right about the commercials. I literally said this not even a week ago. I said, if you are running commercials nowadays, you're only doing it for propaganda reasons, because the only reason that those commercials work is people start to hear the name enough that they start to recognize it. That's it.
Right. Right. And this year, we've got too much going on. I mean, you can run ads in this race, and yes, you'll get the name recognition, but it becomes a neutral. Whereas I'm competing against that and actually out and having the social media and have people, I cause chatter. I cause people to have conversations about stuff. So while they may remember your name, they'll remember my name, but they'll remember why they remember my name.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I remember your name. That's how I remember, because somebody from Arizona shared something that you wrote, and they're my friends and family because I lived there 7 years, and I was like, hey, whoa, what's going on here? And that's the way to do it. You see a lot of campaigns out there that will hire a marketing company, and they'll just they'll say, okay, well, in order to get the vote, you gotta send out 3 posts a day, and they got to be engaging, and you got to have a picture, and the candidate won't even get involved, either because they don't even know social media, or because they're like, oh, well, I hired a guy, I'm paying him, I gotta go talk to people, and it comes off as weak. Nobody wants to go to the page, nobody wants to talk to the candidate. And I got to tell you, a lot of people, especially my age, and it's basically that they don't want to hear the commercials anymore. Like, nobody wants to hear political commercials. They don't matter. Most of them are fake anyway. It's a whole bunch of, hey, look at me, I'm talking to workers, and here I'm talking to a family, and they have a kid, and it doesn't matter. Or they're going the other route and they're just slandering the opponent. Like, hey, here's my name, and that guy is horrible, so vote for me.
Right.
Nobody wants to hear that.
Yeah, people, and actually studies do show that negative ads actually suppress the vote. They cause people to check out. And so I always tell people, start watching who's running negative ads, because they either don't understand the studies, all the studies, or they don't care and they're actually trying to get people who are not fans to check out. And that should be punished. It should be punished that we have people who are trying to be our elected leaders, but intentionally want their constituents to not engage, to not be involved.
Mm-hmm. I was going to check, as far as the polling stations and everything. I know we had a problem back in 2016 where there was 200 polls, and this is the presidential election, where it was 200 polls down to 60. What are we seeing now? Have we seen any reports yet, as far as voting locations or anything going on in that respect? And I know August 26th, August 28th,
August 28th. So just quickly to give a background, what happened was the Supreme Court ruled that certain states that had gotten in trouble for voter suppression and discrimination at the polls before had to give a plan every year before an election showing that they were going to make sure and not discriminate and not suppress the vote and make sure that more people were included. And the Supreme Court case came down and said, okay, we still think discrimination exists, but we're not going to force these states to send a plan beforehand for us to approve, or for it to be approved by a commission. So 2016 was the first time that Arizona, being one of the states that had gotten in trouble and had to put forward this plan, this was the first year that they didn't have to put forward a plan. So I guess since they didn't have to plan, they actually planned to fail. And so they decided to save money by reducing the polls. They closed polls in minority areas. There was so much misinformation. For the presidential election in Arizona, independents are not allowed to vote in the presidential preference election, but they are allowed to vote in all other primary elections. So that caused a lot of confusion. Independents who had always been able to vote in primary elections went to the polls and found out they couldn't vote. There was some purging that happened. And then that further caused a problem because in the real primary that happens in August, independents now were convinced they couldn't vote, so they didn't show up. But this year, I don't know that, because a lot of it comes from the Secretary of State. So I don't know what, and that's a Republican office at this time. I don't know if they're going to make a plan themselves, even though they don't have to legally, and try to make sure that these things don't happen. But I do know that in Maricopa County, we have a Maricopa County recorder who is very passionate about voter inclusion. And he is definitely going to make sure that there are as many ways to vote. He's already made the system electronic. So just like when you go online and you can verify who you are online, technology. Now at the polling stations, if you don't have your ID and you're a registered voter, it can verify you through other means like banks do. So, he's trying to pull us forward into 2018 technology to allow people to be able to vote. He's fought for that. He found boxes of voter registration forms that had not been entered into the database, and he wanted to be able to research them and enter them into the database if they were indeed eligible to be registered voters. And there was a court case and ended up settling, so he's able to do that now. So I know on the Maricopa County level that we have some extraordinary things that are going on to make sure that people have more opportunities to vote. And we're really pushing Pebble, the vote by mail system this year. But it's a statewide, I can't tell you because we haven't seen a plan yet. And the Maricopa County, he's been going around since last year, educating the voters on all of the changes that he's making so that they can vote. The Secretary of State hasn't been doing that, so I'm not sure.
Right. And I'm going to go ahead and give him a shout out. Adrian Fontes is amazing.
Yes.
And he ran on the principles that he just talked about, that he was going to update things. He was going to educate. And it sounds like he's doing it. So that's great.
Yes.
It's good to go right there. So as far as your platform, what do you see as the biggest problems as you're talking to people out in the campaign trail? What do you see as the biggest focal points for the voters? And what's your platform issues that align with that, and how are you going to fix those problems?
So for me, I believe that the underpinning problem for every problem that we have is money in politics. It's absolutely a problem because it's causing our elected leaders to basically try to serve two masters. So instead of serving the constituents, the people who actually have the right to vote for you, so many elected leaders are making decisions based on the next donation or the last donation. And, so politics and money, they really should have a separation. So what I've done is I signed candidates with a contract saying that I will not take any corporate special interest or PAC money. And it's not because I believe those things are bad. I just believe that if you're not human, you shouldn't be able to vote for me. And I also signed a contract that I would work to dismantle Citizens United.
Okay.
I'm okay with corporations and PACs and special interests having the right to have freedom of speech, and even if that speech is termed in money. But if humans have to disclose publicly their donations, and humans have to have a limit on the amount that they can donate per person or per campaign, then we should have the same rules for non-humans. I just feel like that's fair. And also the Supreme Court case says, the minority opinion actually points out that Congress could do that. So I don't understand why Congress hasn't, since the Supreme Court basically already said that's an option. But that's an underpinning problem that affects healthcare, the ability to have healthcare for all, to have a system where the insurance companies, the medical industries, and the pharmaceutical companies, and even the malpractice insurance companies are not pillaging people and basically putting profit ahead of health. We don't have a healthcare system. We have a profit. How much is your health worth to you system? I often call it a GoFundMe healthcare. So
it has been. Unfortunately, there have been people that have died because they have made GoFundMes and they couldn't meet the mark.
Right. One was $50 short.
Yeah.
So, healthcare is huge regardless of where you are in the state. Education is always a huge thing. And in Arizona, we had the whole Red for Ed. So now it's even more on the forefront. And I always say that, it's an infrastructure issue. If we continue to deliberately defund education, we will be a failed state. And we have lots of dilapidated history books in our schools that will actually tell you stories of countries that have failed as a result of not educating their population. Net neutrality, that's one of the biggest things that I talk about, and I have had to argue with a lot of people about its importance because people didn't know what it was. I've been talking about it since May 2017, and most people didn't even know what it was until November, December 2017. Right. And now, this past Monday, the Senate had voted that they wanted to overturn the FCC's ruling that the FCC would no longer do its job of protecting net neutrality. But the House failed to do anything. And when I travel all over the rural areas, but particularly when I go to the Native American lands, I was just in the Navajo Nation. I was in Thanaw before. One of their biggest issues is the ability to access the internet and the ability to have cell phone service. On some of the lands, the only internet that they really can access is landline. The dial-up systems, and they can't afford to have landlines. A lot of them can have cell phones because now that's kind of a utility. Everybody needs a cell phone. We can't survive without it. But then they don't have enough cell towers to either make phone calls or to use the internet. So net neutrality is part of that. A lot of these internet providers, cell phone providers, were actually given an essential monopoly to serve rural areas outside of the big cities where you had a lot of competition. These singular cell phone companies were allowed to go and service these rural communities, and they were basically told, we'll let you be the only one, which is essentially a monopoly, in exchange for that you will build the infrastructure, the towers that will allow these rural communities to access internet and cell phone service. Okay. Now that we no longer are protecting net neutrality, all those agreements go away, but the essential monopoly stays. And if you don't have these services, it's a utility at this point. If you don't have access to internet and cell phone, then you don't have access to find a job. You don't have access to emergency services. And you also don't have access to remote jobs. So we could actually, find or provide jobs to remote communities by remote job work, data entry from home.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of things that can be done remotely, and we're becoming more of a remote society internationally. But if you don't have internet and cell phone, you can't even have these kinds of jobs. And then we say, oh, we need to build more manufacturing companies in the rural areas. Well, that's an option, but that's not the only option. We need to allow these people to have access to this information and this ability to reach out to the rest of the world and be a part of the rest of the world, including in career.
Right, and education through the internet. I actually I met a gentleman while I was out at Standing Rock, Myron Dewey, and he talks about the digital divide in the First Nations people. He goes out and he brings iPads and he teaches folks how to use things and how to build websites and stuff. But there's a huge gap in technology, and I imagine it happens in the rural areas as well, but you can't even get a good phone line out there, never mind a Ethernet cable or Cat5 or whatever kind of internet connection out there.
I drive all over the state. I have 2 cell phones on intentionally on 2 different service providers, and there are times in Arizona when I can't use either phone.
Wow. Yeah, that shouldn't happen. Not at all. And you're right. A lot of places have. I used to work for Verizon. A lot of places have a monopoly in areas. And I used to work in Las Vegas too, near the reservation out there, and they would get letters stating that the cellular companies would tell them, hey, you know what, you've been out here in this area. It's costing us too much to have you as a client because they're paying somebody else for that service. So we have to disconnect you. You have to go find some other service.
Right.
And that shouldn't happen.
Right. Especially since that was the trade-off.
Right.
That was the whole trade-off of the monopoly, is that even though it wasn't a profit opportunity for some of these companies, but it was a monopoly. That was the trade-off. And now you get the monopoly and you get to pick and choose which customers you want to serve according to how much they're willing to pay. But there's no infrastructure. There's no growth. And basically American society is getting nothing for the government allowing these cellular companies to have a monopoly.
Yeah. And you're effectively, you could effectively cause more voter suppression that way too, because you're not getting the knowledge to the phone.
Oh, it's 100%. 100%. I mean, if I always tell people, if you think that fake news is a problem, then go ahead and continue to allow the data not to be treated equally and fairly. Fake news won't be a problem. And this affects small businesses, nonprofits, and people who have websites that are not income generating, that can't afford to pay for their data to get in front of people.
Right.
It's one thing that, Google, you can pay to get on the top of the search engine. That's an advertisement, but it's like, the first 2 or 3 things, and then it's by search words. But what could happen now is, one company doesn't want company C to get in front of the people because they have a relationship with company B. So they boost on their own company B in the search, and company C loses out just because they're not close enough friends or didn't give any money to company A.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I've been in marketing for a long time. I know exactly how it's going to happen. Mm-hmm. And it's not going to be pretty.
Yep.
Especially if you're on the front page of Google, that's usually where you need to be. Second or third page really doesn't get that much attention at all. And most people pay a lot of money to stay on those front pages. So if you're eliminating people from even being able to spend the money, you might as well just not have an online business at that point.
Right. Yes.
It's
and another one of my other top issues that I talk about is separation of religion and state. And that's fundamental to me. I would argue that the Constitution is clear, and Supreme Court cases are clear, that the government should not be involved in your relationship with a higher power or not. But, even if people say, yeah, the Constitution doesn't say that, then my response is, do you want to live in a theocracy? Because I don't. I want to live in a society where everyone has religious liberty, and no one has religious liberty unless everyone has religious liberty, including people who don't want religion. And every single attack on women's sexual freedom and every single attack on the LGBTQ community is a result of people trying to put their interpretation of religion into law to force the rest of us to follow their interpretation. And I think that the government should not be involved in our relationship with God. This is not their... If there's a wall that needs to be built, that's the wall.
That's the wall, huh?
Yeah,
I totally agree. There's no way. And it's not fair for somebody like myself who's, I have beliefs, but I'm not religious, that I should have to, especially in school and stuff, say one nation under God and see on my dollar bills, in God we trust. That is not what I want to see out of my government. It's a total separate thing. I don't want my government involved in my thought process, and I don't want my thought process involved in my government.
Yeah. I don't want my government to tell me what I should do in my bedroom. I don't want my government to tell me what I should be talking about with my doctor. I don't want my government to tell me what kind of relationships I can have in this world or the next. That's what I don't want that. I am a religious person. I have my faith, and I'm happy with my faith. I just don't believe that you have to be happy with my faith as a law. Just no. No. And that's the other thing. Once you start saying that we are a country based on a religion, then you have to define which religion, and then you have to define which sect of that religion. Because even if you said Christianity, are you talking about Protestant or are you talking about Catholic? Because there's some huge differences in there. Yes,
huge differences.
And even if you chose Protestant, are you talking Baptist or Methodist? Because one of them will let you drink and the other one won't.
and that's it, right? Like, I think you would, I don't know, the Constitution would just blow up. It would just be too much.
The government has a moral responsibility to make determinations about what laws are best suited for a diverse society, and that. We can have discussions on what will serve society, but because God said so isn't one of your arguments.
No, not at all. And I'm not religious. But I love everyone, and so I don't believe that anybody should be told anything different based on anybody else's God, and it's just that's a whole nother conversation altogether. But yeah, I agree. And I believe, if I remember history right, which history is another thing altogether, but the people that came over here from Britain didn't want church and state. They were all against the whole.
They were specifically religiously discriminated against. Yes. I mean, specific. Yeah. It's a long tradition of, oh my God, I don't want my government telling me how to practice my religion.
Yeah. I'm from Massachusetts. Yeah, I get it. Like Puritans and everything. Yeah. Yeah. So we shouldn't continue to do that. And we need logic and thought process in our politics. And I appreciate that about you, that you're using logic, and that's what we need.
I've had people ask me that, if you had, what if there was a bill that you needed to vote on, yes or no, and it included something that was against your religion? And my response is, number one, I should look at that bill as how it affects society, in what way it affects society. Is this a good or bad thing in society? Is it more restrictive than it needs to be? Because freedom should always be the underpinning of what we're doing. But I haven't found anything that, in my opinion, that I would be unable, let's say, that I think it's better for society, but it's against my religion. I haven't found anything. But let's just say that I found some outlandish thing that hasn't come to my mind, and I've really thought about this. I would choose not to vote. I would abstain from voting. If I couldn't reconcile that this is better for society, but it's against my faith, I would abstain. But my interpretation of the faith is, if it's better for society, if it's most inclusive, most freedom, it's least hurtful, then I can't imagine how that wouldn't comply within my faith.
Right. And I've had it explained to me many different times by many religious people that if you're talking with your God instead of at your God, then you have a special relationship that is not interfering with your work and your political career. And that makes sense to me. Like I said, I'm not religious. I have beliefs, but still, I believe everybody should be treated equally, and I believe government should stay out of my personal life. So.
And I will go further and say that if your religion is going to interfere with your ability to do a job, the job that you've applied for and received, then you probably shouldn't have that job. And a good example of that is Kim Davis, who had a job, and her job was to give out marriage license according to the law. Right. And when the law said that we had marriage equality and that homosexuals could now get married just like the rest of us, she chose not to give licenses to homosexuals, but she also chose not to give licenses to heterosexuals because she wanted to make her protest bigger. Yeah. So it's immaterial to me which group or both groups that she decided not to give. The point is that she tried to use a position in the government that she had received, and had a job of authority, tried to use her authority to protest a U.S. law. Not your job. You do that when you're off time, you quit and join a nonprofit if you want to, but right. You do not misuse or abuse your authority because you think that your life decision, that your interpretation is against U.S. law. Because if we can do that, then I think that every single person who works in immigration right now should refuse to take those children away from their parents and put them in cages because your religious belief is so strong that you don't think that we should do that to kids.
That's very sad. I saw that the inside the building of the Walmart, there was it was made into a immigration center where they were keeping the kids from the adults. And when I was at Standing Rock, I was there the last day. I got arrested and I was put into one of those cages. And I, as a 40-year-old, you're still like, what am I doing here? I'm in a dog cage. Like, this is ridiculous. But as a kid, you haven't seen the world yet. Your parents are separated from you. You're in a country that you maybe haven't been there that long. It's got to be terrifying.
How many prosecutions have we had in the United States for parents, foster parents, adoptive parents, even blood parents who have kept their children in cages and have gone to jail as a result?
We just had somebody get arrested for having kids in dog kennels, and it was only a half-hour ride.
And also, yes, I saw the dog kennels, but, they've had them cages in the house. They've had them handcuffed or tied up in the basement. They've kept them in closets. And every single time that they have been caught, that this has become a criminal case. But now the U.S. government thinks that this is an appropriate means for the U.S. government to take custody of a child. And this is how we should house children that we prosecute other people for doing.
All we're doing is making more enemies, which seems to be the war industry's idea of peace, is make more enemies. I can't see any other idea in that kid's mind except for, F the United States. This is a disgusting country. Did
you see the messaging that they have on the walls of the detention center? No. So it has a picture of the president, and then it has a message, a quote, something along the lines of, you may not win every battle, but you can still win the war, or something like that. And I immediately looked at this and I said, imagine a child in a cage in a foreign country reading this on the wall every day. And remember that children take things literally. Yeah. So if you took that literally, what does it mean? You're basically having this child subliminally memorize, because they will memorize it. They look at it every day. Yeah. Subliminally memorizing that you may not win the battle, but you can still win the war. We just basically told a child that maybe they need to fight.
Yeah. Yeah, and they don't even know why they're in the cage in the first place.
Yeah.
So who are they fighting? Well, we won't know until something happens.
Until 20 years from now, right, when they remember this quote. This has already been, ingrained in them in one of the most horrific experiences of their life, no doubt. And someone says, "Oh, we should, blow up something in the United States," and they're going to be like, "Yeah, because subliminally, I already memorized that I might not win the battle, but I can win the war." I mean, I just, the tone deafness of 2018 blows my mind.
Very tone deaf. Yeah. And I used to think they were stupid, and I'm getting to the point where I just think it's manufactured ignorance. There's got to be a whole department think tank that understands that what we're doing is we're just making ourselves look like we're the bad guys to everybody. I mean, Canada now doesn't not like anybody, and now they're mad at us. Like you can't.
This is like getting the bishop to hate you.
Yeah. I mean, there are parts of America I call Canada light. The northern parts. Like there are some really nice people in Canada, and I've seen some like YouTube videos where people are cutting each other off, and then they pull over to the side. They have this great conversation about, it's my fault. No, it's my fault. No. Like the Canadians, the ones that I met are just amazing people, and we've proceeded to piss them off. I don't understand our government. I mean, I guess it's set up to work exactly the way it's supposed to, but that to me is not good. That to me is not helpful, because we have a lot of people that don't have medical care, like we talked about. We have a lot of people that have built this country. By the way, the majority of the workers in Arizona that were rounded up by the sheriff, they built a lot of Arizona during the 2000 boom of the housing boom, before it all went bad. There was a lot of immigrant workers.
Katrina, we had a lot of African Americans that moved here after Katrina in relocation. But Katrina itself, they literally bussed in people from Mexico to rebuild New Orleans. They didn't use local talent. They bussed these people in for cheap labor.
Yeah, and if we want to go back, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say, and then lost track of them, or whatever. But the majority of people who are here undocumented came legally. They came on a visa. The visa expired. They didn't have an avenue to renew the visa. So, they had a decision to make, and the decision was to stay. So, that's kind of on us, and building a wall is not going to stop that.
Right, because that's the majority of the people that are here illegally, if we want to call them illegal. I mean, I don't think any human is illegal anyway. Those borders are man-made. But the people that were here on a visa, they stayed. That's how they got here legally. They didn't crawl under a fence. They didn't hop over a fence. They didn't go through a fence.
They didn't hire a coyote,
trains, or automobiles, and they did it legally.
Right. And the other thing that people don't understand is that immigration is an administrative violation. It's a civil violation. Right. So it's equivalent to, like, we think somehow they broke the law, there should be a criminal penalty, but it's equivalent to speeding. You get a ticket, you pay a fine, and then you move forward. And that's the system that it's in. It is not a criminal system, and nor would we want a civil system where you did a administrative violation like speeding or not having your seatbelt on. We wouldn't want that to become criminal and you go to jail for that. But that's exactly what we're expecting of immigration, which is not a criminal system. It is not set up to incarcerate people. But that's what we're seeing. I mean, right now, I can tell you, I just met with a lot of attorneys, and we were talking about the immigration court system and how much it has changed under this administration. And they actually have quotas now. The judges are expected, in order to keep their positions, they have to complete, I think it's 700 cases in a period of time. And if they don't clear 700 cases, then they don't know what their consequences are, but basically they've been told that they will probably be put in a position of an undesirable position as a judge, or could even lose their position as a judge, or they're not really sure what the consequences are. But there's actually a quota system of how courts have to operate. Another thing is they're expected to finish asylum cases in an hour to 2 hour blocks. And that's impossible. It's impossible, especially because in asylum cases, unlike a criminal case, in asylum cases, the judge is actually supposed to participate in the questioning to kind of pull out whether or not this person has an actual asylum claim. Right. And you can't do that in 2 hours. No. So they're expected to crush all this into 2 hours, not get the adequate information. And under the law, they're supposed to have the adequate information in order to make a fair and just determination. particularly under asylum cases. And they don't have the time to do it anymore. They have a quota of how many cases they got to clear. They're expected to not approve the majority of cases. And in the actual immigration court that's in detention centers, the prosecutor, the immigration side, has more power than the judge. So this is a completely unjust system for people who are often here seeking asylum, who have a valid claim. And we just saw that Sessions got involved in a domestic, or in an asylum claim where a woman had been, I think it was Nicaragua, but anyway, her and her husband had been kidnapped by a gang. And they had her husband dig his own grave, and then they killed him and buried him. And then they took her basically as slave labor and forced her to cook and clean for them as a prisoner. And then she got away, came to the United States, asked for asylum. And the judges all the way up said, she's clearly, this is an asylum case. She should be allowed to stay in the country. And Sessions said, wait a minute, give me that case, which the Attorney General is allowed to do. But he said, give me that case, let me look at it. And he came back with his own ruling that said that because she cooked and cleaned for this terrorist gang organization, that she provided material support to terrorism and therefore was barred from ever having any claim in the United States. So this is concerning. I mean, we've had this before, by the way. I mean, Muslims actually have been subject to this material support bogus argument where they can use anything that you've done. You forwarded, basically, a terrorist organization puts a meme on Facebook and you didn't know who it was, but you liked the meme and you shared it. That has been interpreted or could be interpreted as material support for a terrorist organization. But now, we're seeing it not against just Muslims, but now against a clear victim of a crime. And this is, by the way, you should remember Patty Hearst. Patty Hearst actually, was kidnapped, and then, supposedly she had Stockholm syndrome, and she participated willingly. They claim brainwashing, of course, but still she participated and she got off. And this was before the material support argument. But that's what we have here, that it's not that you helped them willingly, but you could literally have a gun to your head forcing you to do something, and you are now providing material support to terrorism and are barred from the United States.
Okay, so she's here now, or?
Yes.
So
now if the law firm or the organization that's representing her, if they want to appeal this to the circuit, and I forgot which circuit it is, I think it's 4, to the circuit court, then the circuit court could potentially make a different ruling. They could overrule the Attorney General. The circuit court 4 is not friendly. It's pretty conservative. And if she loses that case, then you could potentially appeal that to the Supreme Court, who takes, almost no cases. So that's a stretch. But otherwise, she'll be deported back to the country where the gang already tried to kill her and did kill her husband.
And they're probably waiting. They're
like,
please send her up, send her back, and they will make an example of her.
Yeah.
So did they have to give this case to Sessions, or could they have said no? No, he has the right to review cases and make decisions. He's basically the top, as the Attorney General, he's the top of the court system. Scary.
Right? So, he's like the top prosecutor within a system, and, in immigration, prosecutors have more power than the judges or the defense, if you want to make that comparison. But yes, he did have the right, and I don't know that it's necessarily it's not the very first time it's done. This is actually in the rules that the Attorney General can make these determinations, can make exceptions, and then her only thing is maybe to take it to a circuit court.
But it looks like he did it for political reasons. If he went that far to make the connection, like that's a reach. Like you're searching for a reason to send that person back to get killed.
Right. Well, it's What we're hearing over and over, even the separation of children at the border, is that they want to set an example. They want to deter people from attempting to come to the United States, even to ask for asylum. And also what we're hearing on the border from attorneys who are on the border is that people try to present themselves to the border agents and say, I want to claim asylum, and the border agents won't allow them to make the claim. And they will keep them there, keep delaying them, even to make the claim for days. And then sometimes those people are approached by, coyotes and, told that, we can get you around the system. And so some of those people try to go around the system because, they're desperate, and it's been days or weeks where they've tried to, as the law says, report to a legal border agent and tell them that you want to claim asylum. But, it's basically like, trying to go and give a confession at the church, and the priest refuses to open the confessional door. What do you do?
Right. And these folks are told, hey, you can go to the United States, you can ask for asylum. And that's a long way to go. I mean, it's not like it was an easy travel to get here either.
Yeah, they're having to go travel through several countries, and there's the women are getting raped, the men are getting raped, the children are getting raped. Obviously, they're being attacked and people stealing their stuff. And I mean, they know this. They know that they may face these perils along the way. So imagine the level of desperation that they have to be experiencing in their own country to risk doing this. I mean, even if you look at Europe and the people who are, in Syria, trying to get in the boats and travel to Europe, they know that they might die in that water. So imagine the desperation that they must be facing in their country of origin to even risk it, especially with their children. And what will we do for our children? People will die for their children.
Mm-hmm. They will. And this is why I like talking to a lawyer too. Amazing. What was I going to say? It was, I just saw a case where a guy got 25 years for killing like 70 immigrants in a refrigerated truck. 25 years. I mean, these are the lengths that people will go to escape whatever dangerous situation that they're in, that we as Americans on our best day don't have, on our worst day, really don't have to deal with on that level. I mean, there's always danger here, but it's not, you don't have to travel 5 countries because you're going to get killed in your own country. It's something that most Americans just won't deal with.
Imagine the level of privilege, and I mean this in a non-racial way.
Yeah, I get it.
But imagine the level of privilege that I was actually talking to someone in Globe, Arizona, and I had shared her story online. And, she basically said she was working in a restaurant as a waitress, and she had some health issue, or her daughter had some health issues. So she was going to go work for a nuclear plant. I think it was some kind of a plant. And, because the pay was good and she could get health benefits for her daughter, but there was a high likelihood that working in this plant was also would cause health problems for you. There was all this contamination, and almost everybody that works there gets sick. So she was actually talking to me about this trade-off that she for her daughter, she was going to go and put her own health in jeopardy to get enough money and benefits for her daughter who had these health problems. And when I shared this story, the comments that I got back from people was, why doesn't she just move? That's the level of privilege that we're at, that we think that everybody can just move. And that's just not an option for people in the United States. And even when people are, literally facing death to move country to country to get to this country as hope, and then we get upset with them that why don't they just stay in their own country and make it better? Well, we can't seem to make ours. We're leaving people behind right here in this country. And we don't seem to recognize that as we judge people who are leaving their country out of desperation.
Well, there were 12,000 people that are homeless in Seattle, and Starbucks and Amazon decided that they didn't want to pay an extra, I don't know, it was like $300 a year per each employee. So they were going to work against and lie so that wouldn't get approved. the tax wouldn't get approved so that they could, house those people. This is the level of ignorance that we're dealing with all over the United States, and it's a mighty privilege. I mean, Jeff Bezos has never had to deal with that. The leaders of Starbucks have never had to deal with that type of oppression at all, and so they can't possibly see or feel what it's like to go through something like that. And I don't know where I've understood it, but I can tell you, and I've said this many times, that even while I was traveling around the United States unhomed, I still had it better than most of the people in the world. I know that. And I could afford to do that based on my privilege, because I was welcomed into homes. I was treated great all around the United States, and not everybody is treated the same way. So I understand. I don't understand the level of education that the average citizen has, that they would not understand that.
Right. And to take that, what you were talking about with Starbucks and everything, to take that one step further, we've become a very donor generated society. So instead of expecting corporations to pay their fair share, and their share being that they should pay living wages and they should be paying their taxes, that they should not be avoiding taxes or getting tax breaks with no strings attached. This last tax bill allowed these major corporations to get tax breaks in the hopes that they would create more jobs. But there wasn't anything tying that to creating more jobs. And the vast majority of these corporations instead bought back their own stocks and even invested in technology that would allow them to get rid of labor, to actually reduce the number of jobs.
Studies show that the jobs are going to get killed. It's like 2.3 billion by the next 20 years.
Right.
So the process.
And then, a lot of tax havens and hiding money overseas. So they're not paying their fair share of taxes. Then they're getting tax breaks, and they're not paying living wages, and they're reducing the benefits that they have for employees. And in return, we look to them as, they're saving $1 billion by not doing all of these things that they need to be doing for the society that's allowing them to have the profits they have, including using our infrastructure to increase their profits. But in return, because they give a couple of $100,000 in donations every year, they're supporting the community. And that is one of, it's actually a disaster that we've accepted this, that we've allowed them to take advantage of society, but then we think they're so great because they told us that they made donations.
Well, that's the American way too. And unfortunately, is that people will give. And if they hear about donations and they hear about, people giving back to the community, they automatically think their marketing in their head is, they're doing good by the people. But no, they're not. They're giving strategically, and they're making sure that they get their tax cuts.
Oh, and every study also shows that the people who give the most money are not the rich. There's even studies that show that as people go up the economic scale, the amount that they donate lessens. And that's not to say that rich people don't donate. They do. Another part of that is that it hurts more when you only have $100 for you to donate $5 than if you have $100 billion and you donate $500.
Right. Absolutely. So, I mean, we got a lot of problems going on. You're looking to fix them. I appreciate that. I love talking to you. It was an honor having you on the show. Is there anything else that you'd like to tell the folks at home before we go today?
I believe in transparency, accountability. Every single one of my events is on my website and on my social media in advance. We never restrict entry, so anybody can come. We answer all questions. We're authentic. I sign contracts because I believe that if we can't depend on the laws to hold our politicians accountable, then the politicians need to start giving tools to the populace so that they can hold us accountable beyond just trying to vote us out next election. And, it's a fun campaign, and we invite all people to check it out. And everything is pretty much Deedra 2018, the website, the social media, except for Instagram. It's Deedra_2018. I'm not really sure how that happened. That was a really dumb marketing move on somebody's part that I paid for, I guess.
It happened. Somebody probably had that ID and you had to do that. It's all good. Yeah.
Can't imagine.
And your primary is August 28th.
Correct. August 28th is the primary. My primary is one of the few that only has one other candidate in the primary, and the Republicans also have 3 people in the primary. So we're going to have a lot of fun getting to the nitty gritty on this one.
Oh, right on, right on. I've seen your website. It's beautiful. I've checked it out. Please, folks, if you're in Arizona, you know anybody in Arizona, have them check it out. And as you may or may not know, they're always looking for volunteers. So if anybody wants to volunteer, also donations always help. And, you know, grassroots helps grassroots. So that's how it goes. So
Bottom line with grassroots, share the social media if you like it and talk to people that you know. This is a phone tree and water cooler year.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, Deedra. It's really been a pleasure. And if you'd like to come on anytime before the primary, please just reach out and we'll have you on.
Thank you. It's my pleasure always.
You're welcome. Have a good day.
You too.
All right, guys, you heard it. There it is. Deedra Abboud. Check out our website, Deedra2018.com. Her social media is Deedra2018 on Instagram. You can just type in Deedra Abboud. You'll find her, but it's Deedra_2018. Please check out our Facebook posts. Like I said, they are amazing. It puts a smile on my face, honestly, when I see the level of patience that Deedra has and the level of understanding that Deedra has about the American people and about the people in Arizona. It's really engaging, and it's great to see that folks still have their head on their shoulders and they're still willing to talk to the people as if they're people. So that's what I like about Deedra. Definitely check her out, and thank you for joining us today. Chief Correspondent for Activate On News, Ed Higgins, and I'm out. Peace.